are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello there, IELTS students. In this tutorial, we are looking at the IELTS Speaking section, and we're going to look at 3 techniques that can help you sound more confident, that help you respond quickly and automatically to the tutor, and also probably boost your confidence, because they are quite effective measures, techniques, and if you implement them, and if you implement them successfully, they will help you a lot. Now, also at the end of the tutorial, because I want to perfect these techniques, one of them is an oldish one, which I've used and told you about in previous tutorials, but the other two are new ones that I want to perfect, and I want to just test out these techniques on some new students, and I can tell you more about that because I need about 9 students to test these techniques on. I've got them half baked at the moment. The first one is fully baked, and I can tell you more about that in a second, and the other 2 are new ones, which I'll share later on in this tutorial. Now, this first one I was using just last week because I've restarted teaching online for a family member, because just a few weeks ago I was at a family gathering and I was telling my girlfriend's family about what I do for a job. And as you know, with families, word gets around, and before I knew it, I had a cousin messaging me asking if he could have classes and prepare for the IELTS exam. Now, this has never happened before, because if I've been with my family and I tell them about my job, obviously because they're all English speakers, native English speakers like me, they never inquire. But with this incident, it was different. And I didn't want to turn this student away because it's a family member. So I said, okay, I can do it once this time, but I won't be able to do it again because usually I just don't have the time. So anyway, I started working with my girlfriend's cousin, and it was working all right. It was working good. We basically worked on 3 techniques. All of these 3 techniques I will share in this tutorial, and the reason why I'm sharing them is because I will need about 9 students to work with me in order to perfect these techniques. Now, the first one I have shared before in previous tutorials, but it'll be a good reminder if you didn't catch that podcast or you may have just forgotten about it. So I'll go into that one first, and then later I will share the other 2. So the first one is the reflected speech. Now, what this involves is that you hear a question, for example, in the present simple, and you respond in the present simple. It's quite simple. But basically, you identify the tense that the examiner is using, and you use that tense in your reply. Now, this is incredibly simple, but it's also incredibly effective. Now, when I was working with my girlfriend's cousin, we drilled this to a certain point, to a level of automaticity. So whatever question I said, it came back to me in the same tense. And this is the first part of the process. You do this because this way there is no disconnect. For example, if the examiner asks me, what do you like to do in your free time? And I reply, last night I played squash. It was a really tough game, and that's what I do most nights, to be honest with you. I'm not really answering the question. It's like 70% accurate, or maybe even 60% accurate, because I'm kind of saying what I do in the evenings. Eventually I say what I do in the evenings, but that's not all of my free time. A better answer would have been to use the same tense that was asked in me instead of switching to the simple past, which was last night I played squash. A better way would have been to say, in my free time, I'll usually play squash, or sometimes I'll even go bowling. It just largely depends on the weather, because if it's quite good, I'll take the opportunity and go for a bike ride. Okay? This way I used the same tense that I was asked in, and it just seemed a little bit more coherent. Now, with my girlfriend's cousin, we drilled this until it became quick and automatic. The problem is that if you do it in the test, throughout the test, you sound like a robotic parrot. So the next stage we did is we worked on adding some phrases and some adverbs of frequency, and this way it started to sound more natural. So for example, do you work or do you study? Well, to be honest, most of the time I study, because my university course is incredibly hard, but when I get the opportunity, I like to work. I really love my job, and it provides me with a little bit of extra spending money. You see, this way it wasn't sort of like a direct parrot reply. I added some adverbs of frequency, I added some expressions, and it sounded much more natural. And we can get to the point where it sounds so natural that the reflection and the automaticity eventually just becomes invisible. So the examiner doesn't really know that you are parroting back in the same tense, because we've baked in the adverbs of frequency, phrases, possibly even an idiomatic expression if it is appropriate. And this is the first technique that I worked on with my girlfriend's cousin. Using this technique as well also buys you a few microseconds, because in most cases you know the first few words of your answer, and then this gives you time to sort of like construct the rest of it. So the first part, you know instantly what you are going to say, because you're reflecting it. Ideally, you've added the adverbs of frequency and whatnot, and the other elements that we train you with, but it just gets you started, and it avoids those like panic stations. And it also, just having this knowledge that you know that you can answer every single question quite effectively also boosts your confidence. And we all know that with languages, confidence is a critical issue. And this is one of the exercises that I want to work on with the students that I need for to develop the other techniques. I also realized that this skill will help you with your listening, because you're going to pay more attention, and it's going to help you in other areas of your life, especially the third technique, where we develop skills about how to explain abstract concepts, abstract ideas, and complex ideas and thoughts. And this technique really helps you develop that skill, and it's one of those skills that can overspill into your career. For example, a doctor explaining to a patient something quite complex will need this ability to make sure that the patient understands. For example, if the patient doesn't understand it the first time, the dexterity with the language will come in handy to explain the same thing in a different way. So it's one of those skills that can really spill over into your everyday life. Now, just a side note, that if you're on the bench about taking IELTS, I'd really consider going for it, because at the moment, at least in the UK, things are opening up. And in Canada, I'm not so sure about Australia, but things are opening up, and it looks like possibly the worst is behind us. India is vaccinating an incredible amount of people every single day. It looks like normality could be returning. And when things are tricky, when things are difficult, like we've just seen with the pandemic, a lot of people will just shelve their plans for a year or two, but the determined will keep on pushing. And that means that, especially now, if you're determined and you keep on pushing, a lot of the laggards, a lot of the other people who haven't carried on pushing have dropped out. So that means that there will be less competition for you for that place in Canada or for that job in the UK. Right then, let's move on to the second technique. This is knowledge about your life. Now, you may think that you know everything about your life, and you probably do know more about your life than anybody else. However, that does not mean you can communicate it as well as you know it. For example, if I ask you to tell me about your favorite childhood teacher, a picture might come into your mind, and then you start explaining them, and then at that exact moment, you might realize, oh, I don't have the vocabulary that I need. Now, how do you develop this? Well, with the student I was teaching, we kind of like stumbled across this quite useful method whereby I gave him all the questions, lots of questions, and then he wrote out the answers. We reviewed them together, we improved them, and then we drilled them, and eventually we got them natural. We got them to that natural status, so they didn't sound programmed, they didn't sound robotic. And the beautiful thing was, some of the structures that we learnt about how to describe a person, some of the grammatical structures, we could carry them over to talk about, to describe maybe architecture. And because we drilled them, they came out naturally. We learned them to such a level of automaticity. And this was incredibly useful. And the thing is, I need 9 more students. I think about 9. I'll tell you more at the end. But I want to practice this method. And I want to basically standardize it. So I want to work with some more students so we perfect this method and we can quickly pull out some standard structures, and then I can put them into the new Speaking Confidence course when we update it. So that's the reason why I'm looking for some new students, because we're basically going to work through the similar questions, probably a little bit more extensive. Then we're going to improve your answers, and then I'm going to look through all the data that I've collected from all the students, and then eventually create a program or a new course around that information. And the idea is that it'll be me and you. It's just one-on-one classes online, probably for about an hour. You've done all the prep work beforehand. I've worked through it and I've gone and improved it, and then we practice it and we drill it, and I give you more advice, and we have a lot of repetition in there, and we get it to the point where your answers are confident and natural, but also using higher level structures and vocabulary so that we can pass this exam. And honestly, this is really quite a good opportunity, because maybe you are doing speaking classes at the moment, but you've got one of those general English tutors who does business English on a Wednesday, toddlers on a Tuesday, baby English on a Friday, and that might be the reason why we're not progressing at the way you want to. Also, if you've got your test coming up, do you really want to gamble maybe missing another test and then having to go through all the preparation again? So I'm not saying I can guarantee you pass with me. Okay, I'll be totally honest. I cannot guarantee that. I do guarantee a grade improvement with the writing. That's something different because we've perfected that. We've worked with lots of students in the past. We know the system works. We've got confidence in that. This is more about fine-tuning the material, getting some one-on-one time with myself, and it won't be easy. There'll be quite a tough class, so I strongly recommend you have a good coffee before joining us. And that brings me on to the third technique. With this one, it was similar to the second one that I shared, except it's all about abstract thoughts, complex ideas, and expressing yourself and comparisons, like higher level grammar structures. And on this one, there's less work from you, and it's more about drilling some certain sort of like structures and repeating them until we get to a level of automaticity. Now, we've got some of the structures, we've got most of them, but we've probably got too many, and this is why I need some students so that I can test which ones are going to stick, which ones are easiest to grasp, and finally, which ones are we going to include in the course. Now, there is a little bit of work from you from this one, not as much as the other one, but we want some written exercises completed as well, because I'm a strong believer that improvements in writing can carry over to the speaking, and especially with these grammatical structures, there's a tremendous benefit from actually seeing them in front of you. So that would be the third technique. We're going to really push you to form abstract thoughts and like explain abstract ideas, and the wise ones among you will have realized that this is band 7 and above criteria from the IELTS exam. So to get a band 7 or above, this is what you need to be covering. Okay, and we are going to be working, it's just one-on-one, and we're going to be looking at all the different structures and drilling them into you until they become automatic. Okay, not just the conditionals, we're going to go a little bit further than that, and as I said, we're looking for these 9 students, and we're going to filter which ones, and we're going to select and find out which ones stick with the students, which ones work best, and then incorporate them into the online course. Now, as I said, we've got space for 9 students. All the classes will be with me. There'll be nobody else on the call. It'll just be you and me. We want to do this pretty quickly, so you need to go to IELTSPodcast.com/intensive, and the first 3 students who sign up will get a $150 discount on a pack of 9 classes, and then the next 4 to sign up will get a $100 discount. Okay, and you get all the information and the coupons at IELTSPodcast.com/intensive. And because these are trial classes, that's why they are slightly lower, not slightly, they are considerably lower than the normal rates I would charge. And also that's why we've got the coupon, because we want to get started with this as soon as possible. In fact, after you purchase them and you've used the coupon and it's gone through, you immediately get through to a URL where you can book your classes, and you'll also get the forms as well. Now, as I said, this won't happen again for a while, until maybe my next family dinner with my girlfriend's family. But the thing is, I don't usually do one-on-one classes, but because of this family dinner, I didn't want to say no, and it let me just jump-started the update that I wanted to do for the Speaking Confidence course. So this is why I need the 9 students. So go to IELTSPodcast.com/intensive, and hopefully you will eventually be on the podcast with me, and we'll be talking about how you passed your IELTS speaking exam, and we can have a conversation and publish it and inspire more students. So thank you very much for listening. Good luck with your IELTS exam, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.